The inn-yard at Ashby Cross had not changed in 7 years. The same crooked sign, the same stable-boy older now by a head, the same smell of wet hay and wood smoke threading the November dusk. I stepped down from the carriage in a black travelling cloak that had cost more than the inn's annual rent, and the boy who took my hand did not know me. That was the first measure I took. If the village would not recognize Eleanor Marchmont Ashby walking through its gate, then the village had been told a thorough lie, and I had come home to the right country. I gave my name as Madame Ashby, foreign enough to discourage inquiry, close enough that, when I chose, I could let the rest of it fall. "A room, ma'am?" said the innkeeper, peering. "For how long?" "As long as my business requires," I said. "I expect it will take 3 days." He nodded and asked nothing further. He did not ask whose business. He did not ask why a woman in mourning would arrive at Ashby Cross alone, with a leather case strapped against her wrist as though it carried her life, which it did. He set the candle on the stair and left me with my own breathing for the first time in 12 days. I opened the case on the bed. Inside lay 3 documents. The first was a sealed will in the hand of my late employer, Madame Verlinden of Antwerp, dated 1816, naming me as her sole legatee and executrix, and assigning to me the sum of £18,000, free of every encumbrance. The second was an affidavit in French, sworn before the British consul at Brussels last September, testifying that my mother had been lawfully married to my father in 1791 in the Catholic chapel at Ostend, and that a registered copy of that marriage existed under seal in the diocesan archive. The third was a single letter, 3 pages long, written in 1810 to my mother by a man who had loved her and who had been afraid for me. He had not been afraid enough. He had died 3 months after writing it, and the letter had reached me only this summer, by a route I did not yet have the patience to recount. Madame Verlinden had not been a private woman. Her household had included a notary of 40 years' standing, a physician who had attended her since her widowhood, and a chaplain who had buried her husband and read her last rites. All 3 had been my friends. All 3 had written to me before I sailed, promising whatever testimony I might one day need, and I had asked them then to write nothing of it down. I would write to them when the moment came. I closed the case and locked it. In Antwerp I had decided 3 things. I would not weep when I arrived. I would not negotiate before I had walked the rooms. And I would not let the man who had buried my name speak first. The bell from the village church tolled 7. I blew out the candle. In the morning I would call on the Earl of Ashby, my cousin Hugo, at the house that should have been mine. And in the afternoon, if my calculations held, I would call on the Duke of Ravensmere, on whose late father's signature the lie had been built. I did not know yet whether the Duke had known. I would find that out from his face, in the second between my name and the moment his manners closed it down. I did not sleep. The Ashby silver had been recast. I noticed it on the breakfast sideboard within the first 30 seconds of being shown into Hugo's drawing room. I had played as a child with these pieces. I knew the weight of each spoon. The quartering on the bowl of every spoon had been ground down, and the surface filed smooth and re-stamped with the bare Ashby arms alone. My mother's family quarter, the Marchmont sable and silver, had been erased from the silver, as it had been erased from the registers. I drew a finger along one spoon. In the absence under my fingertip was the loudest thing in the room. "Madame Ashby." Hugo entered behind me, fastening a cuff. He was 31 now, and softer through the jaw than I remembered. He had been the cousin who taught me to ride. I had not expected the punch of it. Behind him, on the writing table, sat a lady's case in pale green leather, monogrammed in a hand I did not know. C.M. So Hugo had a wife. She had not come down. I filed the case in my mind and moved on. "I confess your card surprised me," he said. "I do not know any Madame Ashby." "You did once," I said. He stopped. He looked at me properly then. His mouth opened and closed twice before he managed the word. "Eleanor." "Eleanor Marchmont Ashby," I said. "Yes." The silence that followed was the silence of a man calculating how much trouble has just walked through his door. I let him do the calculating. I had been doing my own for 7 years. "You were," he began, and could not finish the sentence. "Sent away" was what he had been going to say, or declared, or struck off. "I was 19 the last time we stood in this room together," I said. "You were 26. Your father had been dead 1 year. My father had been dead 1 year. Mr. Crayle brought you an affidavit signed by the late Duke of Ravensmere, stating that my mother and father had never been lawfully married, that I was a natural child, and that the title and estate passed in clean line to you. You accepted it. I was put on a ship to my mother's sister in Bruges within the fortnight. Have I summarized the facts to your satisfaction?" "Eleanor, have I summarized the facts?" "Yes," he said. "Good. Then we may proceed." I crossed to the sideboard and lifted the spoon I had been examining. I held it up between us. "I notice the silver has been altered." He flushed. "That was Mr. Crale's recommendation." Of course it was. I set the spoon down with great care. "I have come to inform you of 3 things, Hugo. The first is that I am no longer in need of your charity, your protection, or your acknowledgement, and you may keep all 3. The second is that a duly registered copy of my parents' marriage exists in the diocesan archive at Ostend, that I hold a notarized affidavit of its existence, sworn before the British consul, and that my solicitor in London is at this moment instructed to apply for its certified extract. The third is that I have not yet decided what I intend to do with these facts. I came to see your face before I decided. I had thought I might enjoy the moment. I did not. Hugo had gone the color of paper. His hands were trembling at his sides, and I could see, very clearly, that he had known. Not the whole of it, perhaps, not the forgery, but enough. He had known there was a marriage, and he had chosen not to find it. The cousin who taught me to ride had been bought, and the price had been Ashby. "What do you want?" he said. "That is the wrong question." I drew my gloves on. "The right question is what Mr. Crayle will offer me to be silent, and whether you will let him." I left him standing among the recast silver. The Duke of Ravensmere received me in his library at 4 o'clock that afternoon. I had calculated the timing carefully, late enough that the morning's business with Hugo would have travelled the half-mile between estates by way of a stable lad and a kitchen maid, early enough that the Duke would not have rehearsed an answer. I gave the footman my own name this time, Eleanor Marchmont Ashby. I watched his face. He did not flinch. Either his discretion was extraordinary, or he had not been long in the household. I followed him through a hall hung with portraits. Ravensmere's in armour, Ravensmere's in lace, Ravensmere's with hounds and horses, and into a long room with 2 fires and a window onto a wet garden. The Duke rose from a writing desk near the second fire. I had not seen Adrian Whitcomb since I was 16, and he was 20, and his father had brought him to dine at our house in his first year out of Oxford. He had been thin then, and rather quiet, and had spoken to me only once across the table, to ask whether I liked Cooper. I had said no, and he had laughed. He was not thin now. He had the build of a man who had ridden hard for years, and the still bearing of one who had learned to keep it concealed. His hair was dark, cropped close at the temples, longer at the crown. His eyes were a very dark blue, almost black in the firelight, and they did not soften when they found mine. A pale scar ran from the heel of his left hand up the inside of the forearm and disappeared under the cuff. He wore mourning bands on both sleeves. I knew his father had died 3 years ago. I did not know what else he was mourning, and I did not ask. Miss Ashby, he bowed. He used the surname. He had heard then. Your Grace. You will sit. It was not a question. He nodded the footman out and closed the door himself, which was improper, and which I appreciated. He poured 2 glasses of something dark from a decanter and set one in front of me without asking whether I drank. I have been waiting for you for 7 years. The sentence dropped into the room like a stone into a well. I had prepared for many opening lines. That had not been among them. Explain, I said. He sat opposite me. He set his glass down without drinking. His thumb moved once across the rim, an unhurried gesture, the only thing about him that was not still. My father died in 1814, he said. Among his papers I found the affidavit Mr. Crayle prepared in 1810, the one bearing my father's signature, in which he attested as witness that no marriage had taken place between your father and your mother. I knew my father's hand. The signature was not his. I went to Crayle within the week. He told me he had only my father's word against his own, and that pursuing it would ruin 2 houses and produce nothing for the girl who had been sent abroad. He used those words, the girl who had been sent abroad. He did. And what did you say to him? I told him I would not pursue it that day. And then I spent 3 years finding out where the girl had been sent. I felt something in my chest shift in a way I did not authorize. You found me. I knew you were in Antwerp by the autumn of 1815. I knew you were companion to a Madame Verlinden by the spring of 1816. I knew she died in October. I did not know whether you would come back. I have been waiting. He paused. I am very glad you have come back. Why did you not write to me? Because I had nothing to offer you, but news that would have unmade you a second time, and no settlement but against it, and a hand that you had every reason to refuse on sight. I will not lie to you, Miss Ashby. I was a coward. I told myself I was waiting for evidence I could not be accused of manufacturing. I was waiting for you to walk through my door under your own power. You have. Here we are. The fire cracked once. The dark drink in front of me was untouched. I said, You should not have used my surname when you greeted me. No, he said. I should have used Lady Eleanor. I will, from this point. I beg your pardon. I could not look at him for a moment. I looked instead at the line of his forearm, where the cuff hid the scar. I looked at the mourning bands. I looked at the writing desk behind him, on which I could see a stack of letters in his own hand, sealed and not yet sent. and a sheet of paper covered in calculations. "What are those?" I said. He glanced at the desk without turning. "Estimates of what your father's estate has rendered in rental value over the 7 years it has been in your cousin's hands. Calculations of what a just settlement would look like if the marriage is proved. A draft letter to my own solicitor, instructing him to fund the application at Ostend. They are dated yesterday. I did not know you would come today. I did not know you would come at all. I have been writing such letters for some time, and not sending them. Show me." He hesitated. Then he rose, crossed to the desk, and brought the topmost sheet to me. I read it through. The figures were correct. The instructions to his solicitor were the instructions I would have given to mine. He had thought of everything I had thought of, and a few things I had not. The draft was dated the 17th of November, 2 days earlier. I set the page down. My hand was perfectly steady. I do not know how. "Your Grace," I had not meant to use his title. The word came out anyway. "Stop apologizing. I am not the one you wronged. Your father was used, and Mr. Crayle lied, and Hugo took the seat without earning it. And the wrong is theirs. You did not do this to me. You have spent 3 years preparing to undo it. I do not require your contrition. I require your help." He looked at me for a long moment. "What do you need?" he said. "I need a witness with your standing to swear that the affidavit Crayle produced in 1810 was forged. I need access to your father's papers to find the cover letter or the request that produced the forgery, if it exists. I need a barrister who will not be intimidated, and I need a witness room, somewhere Crayle cannot guess at, where I can examine him before he learns I am in England." "He already knows you are in England." "Then I need it tonight." "You shall have it tonight," he said. We did not finish until past midnight. Adrian, I was not yet calling him that, even in my own head, though I will tell this story honestly and admit that I had begun to think of him by the first name in the carriage on the way back to the inn. Adrian had brought down from the attic a strapped trunk containing the private papers of the late Duke. He had not opened it since 1814. He had been afraid, he said, of what else he would find. We opened it together at the long library table. I had expected the search to take days. It took 2 hours. Near the bottom of the trunk, under a bundle of letters from a woman who was not the late Duke's wife, and whom I will not name here, because she did not deserve to be uncovered twice in one evening, we found a folded sheet of paper, sealed with Mr. Crayle's stamp. The seal was unbroken. It was a private letter from Crayle to the late Duke, dated the 8th of March, 1810, 3 weeks before the affidavit had been signed. Adrian read it first. His face did not change. He passed it across to me. "Your Grace, the matter of the Ashby succession progresses as discussed. I have prepared the affidavit on the lines you suggested. I require your signature as witness only. The substantive testimony is mine, and is supported, in the alternative, by oral evidence I have undertaken to procure, should it be required. The girl is not yet aware, and I do not anticipate that she will become so. Bury her name with her mother's, and Ashby is secured. The arrangement with Lord Marchmont is as discussed. Yours faithfully, H. Crayle." I read it twice. "Bury her name with her mother's," I said. The words tasted of iron. "My father did not sign," Adrian said. "Look at the trunk." I looked. The seal was unbroken. The letter had never been opened. The late Duke had received it, had not opened it, had filed it among private papers, and 3 weeks later, his signature had appeared on an affidavit he had never agreed to witness. Crayle had not waited for permission. He had forged the witness signature and gambled that the late Duke, aging and ill, and distracted by the unnamed woman whose letters lay in the same trunk, would never check. He had been right. For 7 years. Adrian set both palms flat on the table. He did not speak for some time. "I am going to destroy him," he said at last. He did not raise his voice. The flatness of it was more frightening than any shout I had ever heard. "No," I said. He looked up. "You are not going to destroy him," I said. "I am. You will be in the room. You will hold the door. You will produce this letter at the moment I name. But the destruction is mine. I have earned it." He inclined his head. "As you say, Lady Eleanor." That was the first time he used the title. He used it as though it had always been mine. I had not realized how much I needed to hear it spoken, in an English voice, in an English room, until I heard him say it. I rose to leave. He rose with me. At the door he hesitated, as though to say something, then did not. I went out into the cold. In the carriage back to the inn, I caught myself thinking of the way his thumb had moved across the rim of the glass, and had to look out of the window for a 1/4 mile to undo it. The next 4 days were the busiest of my life. I will not pretend they were not also the happiest. I had been unmoored for 7 years. To have a plan, a desk, an ally, a clean stack of paper and an inkpot, and a witness I could rely on. To be back inside a structure, working, felt like being given a body again. Adrian put his own house at my disposal in everything but name. We did not meet alone. He had a married cousin from London arrive by the 2nd day to serve as nominal hostess. Lady Anne Whitcomb, his late uncle's daughter, married 5 years to a barrister in town and uninterested in any society opinion of her movements. He had also installed a chaperone for me in the form of his great-aunt, Mrs. Whitcomb, a woman of 70 who had buried a husband and 3 sons, and who looked at me on arrival and said, "Lady Eleanor, you have come a long way. Sit down, eat something. We shall manage them all." And I was grateful for her in a way I had not been grateful for anyone since Madame Verlinden. The barrister Adrian engaged was a Mr. Pelham of Lincoln's Inn, 60 years old, dry as a stick, and twice as sharp. I instructed him myself. I produced Madame Verlinden's affidavit, the cover letter from Crayle to the late Duke, the unbroken seal, my own statement, and the application to Ostend that Adrian's solicitor was already preparing. Mr. Pelham heard me through, asked 4 questions, made 1 correction to my chronology and said, "Lady Eleanor, you have brought me a complete brief. I am not accustomed to complete briefs. We will proceed." I worked. In the evenings, I sat with Mrs. Whitcomb and Lady Anne in the drawing-room, and Adrian read aloud. Cowper, of all things, because I had said I had never come to like him, and Adrian intended to change my mind. And once, when he reached the end of a passage and looked up, I caught him not looking at the page he had been reading, but at me, and he did not look away when caught. I held his eye for the count of 3. He held mine. Mrs. Whitcomb, without lifting her own eyes from her embroidery, said, "Adrian, the next stanza." And he resumed reading. I felt the heat rise in my face for a full minute afterwards. On the 3rd evening, after Mrs. Whitcomb had retired, Adrian asked whether I would walk with him in the long gallery before bed. Lady Anne was there. Lady Anne would walk 3 steps behind. It was as proper as anything we had done. We walked the length of the gallery twice in silence. The portraits watched. At the far end, where the gallery turned into a small anteroom. He stopped under a window through which I could see the moon, and he said, "Lady Eleanor, I am going to ask you something that I have no right to ask. I'm going to ask it now, because if I wait until your case is concluded, you will be free. And I do not want you to think I am asking you in any moment when you have less power than I do. I want you to be the woman with all of it when you answer." I did not breathe. "Ask," I said. "When this is finished, when Crayle is broken and Ashby is yours, and your name is back on every register in England, I would like to ask leave to call on you, not as your ally, as a man. I have nothing to recommend me except that I have been waiting for you since 1814, and I will wait longer if you wish me to. You may say no. You may say not yet. You may say only after my case is done. I am only asking that you know I am asking." I had been prepared for many things on the journey back to England. I had not been prepared for this. I looked at him in the moonlight. I saw the scar, the mourning bands, the dark eyes that had not softened on my arrival, and that were not soft now, but were entirely open. I saw a man who had spent 3 years preparing the calculations on his desk for a woman who had not asked him to. I should have said, "Not yet." What I said was, "Adrian, walk me back." He bowed his head. He understood. He had not been refused. He had been told to wait until the work was done. I saw his shoulders ease and his jaw set, and we walked back along the gallery in silence, with Lady Anne 3 steps behind. And at the foot of the stair, I gave him my hand for the first time without my glove on. He took it for 1 second. He did not bring it to his lips. He let it go. I went up to bed and slept 4 hours. I summoned Mr. Crayle on the morning of the 5th day. I did it by means of a note in my own hand, on Ashby paper Adrian had had printed for me overnight from my mother's original quartering, brought from the press, still warm. The note said only, "Mr. Crayle, Lady Eleanor Marchmont Ashby requests your attendance at Ravensmere House this morning at 11 o'clock on a matter regarding the Ashby succession. The Duke of Ravensmere will receive you. Mr. Pelham of Lincoln's Inn will be present." I knew Crayle would come. He had no choice. To refuse a summons signed Lady Eleanor on Ashby paper was to concede the question of the title before he even sat down. He would come because he had to come, and he would come thinking he could still talk his way out, because for 7 years no one had been able to make him afraid. He arrived at 3 minutes past 11, 10 pounds heavier than the man I had last seen at 19, with a London cut to his coat and a leather case very like mine. Adrian received him in the morning room. I was not visible. Mr. Pelham was. I came in after a count of 90. I had measured it on a watch. I wanted Crayle to have settled into the chair before he saw me. I wanted him to have already begun explaining to Adrian why the matter could be quietly resolved, before the door behind him opened and Lady Eleanor Marchmont Ashby walked in, wearing her mother's pearls and the quartering on paper, and 7 years of perfectly preserved patience. His face when he turned was the only payment I had wanted in 7 years. "Mr. Crayle," I said, "sit down. You were standing for no reason." He sat. "Mr. Pelham will conduct the interview," I said. "I will intervene as required. The Duke of Ravensmere is present as witness. You will answer truthfully. If you do not answer truthfully, I will be obliged to apply to the courts for a remedy that will take from you not only your practice, but your liberty. Do you understand?" "Lady," he began, "do you understand?" "Yes." Mr. Pelham took him through it. He did it in the dry, methodical voice of a man who had broken better liars before breakfast. He established the date of the affidavit, the parties to it, the witness named, the substance attested. He established Crale's knowledge of the marriage at Ostend. He established the chain of correspondence. He established the unopened seal on the cover letter to the late Duke. When Mr. Pelham produced the cover letter, Crale's hands began to shake. "I should like a private word with my client," he said, by which he meant himself, because he had no client. "No," I said. "Lady Eleanor, you wrote, 'Bury her name with her mother's.' You wrote those words to a man who never read them. You forged his signature on the affidavit you produced 3 weeks later. You committed a fraud on a court of probate. You sent a girl of 17 abroad with a story that her parents had not been married. My mother died in 1808. My father died in 1810. You used my mother's death to bury me. You will tell me now, in this room, in front of these witnesses, why." He looked at the carpet. "Mr. Crayle, your cousin Hugo's mother," he said to the carpet. "Lady Marchmont, the Dowager. She approached me in 1809, when your father was already ill, with the suggestion that the marriage at Ostend might never be proved. She was concerned for the line. The Ashby estate could not pass to a daughter, not without a special remainder, and there was none. If the marriage was held to have failed, the title and the entailed estate would go to Hugo without question. There were also debts. Hugo's mother offered to underwrite my practice for 10 years in exchange for the affidavit. I drafted it. I required the witness signature of a peer of standing. The late Duke was the obvious choice. He was ill. He was distracted. You forged his name." "I forged his name." "Did Hugo know?" "He suspected. He did not ask. He paid me an annual fee from 1810 onward." "And his mother?" "Lady Marchmont died in 1814. "So she escaped this," I said. "She did." I let the silence hold for a long moment. I had wondered in Antwerp whether I would weep when I knew. I did not weep. The thing in my chest was quieter than weeping. It was the absence of a noise I had been carrying for 7 years. "Mr. Crayle?" I rose. "Mr. Pelham will draft your full confession. You will sign it. You will deliver to Mr. Pelham within the week the complete file of correspondence between yourself and Lady Marchmont, and yourself and the Earl, my cousin. You will resign your practice. You will not contact any other party to this matter. You will then present yourself to the Lord Chancellor's office, where Mr. Pelham will lay the documents that result in your striking off and your prosecution for fraud and forgery. You will not flee the country. If you flee the country, I will pursue you to whatever continent you reach, and I will find you, because I have already done it once, in reverse. Do you understand?" "I understand. Get out of my sight." He went. I did not sit down for a full minute after the door closed. I stood at the window looking at the wet garden. I heard Adrian, behind me, set Crale's chair upright and pour out 3 glasses. He did not say anything. He waited. When I turned, he handed me the glass without comment. I took a sip. It was the same dark drink from the first afternoon. It had no particular taste. It was the taste of a thing being over. "Lady Eleanor," said Mr. Pelham from his chair. He had not risen. He was making notes with great calm. I have practiced for 41 years. That was the most efficient examination I have ever witnessed. Will you take tea? I laughed. It surprised me. I had not laughed in this country since 1810. I will, I said. Yes, I will take tea. The 2 weeks that followed were the cost. Mr. Pelham's office in London circulated the confession to the necessary parties on a Tuesday. By Friday, the news was in 3 London papers. By the Monday after that, every drawing room in Mayfair was holding the same conversation, and not all of it was sympathetic. There will always be those, who held that Lady Marchmont's daughter had been better off thought illegitimate than allowed to inherit. There were those who blamed Hugo. There were those who blamed Adrian on the grounds that he had known since 1814 and had taken 3 years to bring it to court. There were those who blamed me for reasons of my own which I did not investigate. The cost arrived in a particular form. A scandal sheet I will not dignify by naming printed on the second Saturday an item suggesting that Lady Eleanor Marchmont Ashby's 3 years abroad in the household of a Belgian widow had been less than respectable, that the £18,000 Madame Verlinden had left her had not been left freely, that the Duke of Ravensmere had taken up her cause for reasons that did not bear discussion in a family paper, and that any settlement she received in England would be founded on a reputation that had not survived Antwerp. Adrian was in London when the item appeared. I was at the inn at Ashby Cross. Mr. Pelham forwarded the paper to me by the afternoon post, with a covering letter explaining the article's provenance. Hugo's wife, the CM whose case I had seen on his writing table, had spoken to a woman who had spoken to the editor, and his recommendation that I issue no response and let him pursue an action for libel. I sat with the paper for an hour. Then I wrote to Adrian. Your Grace, I have seen the paper. I am writing to ask you not to come to me until the libel action is begun, and not to write to me on it. Any correspondence between us at this hour will be construed as further proof of what the paper alleges, and I will not have your name used as the evidence against mine. I will write to you when this part of the work is done. E. I sealed it. I gave it to the innkeeper for the Morning Post. I lay awake that night thinking I had made the right decision and feeling that I had not. The libel action took 11 days. Mr. Pelham conducted it with the same dry precision. Madame Verlinden's notary in Antwerp sent depositions. Her physician and her chaplain sent depositions. The paper folded by the end of the second week and printed a full retraction on its front page over the editor's signature. The editor was fined. The woman who had spoken to him was identified as Hugo's wife, who was Hugo's problem, not mine. But in those 11 days, I did not see Adrian, and I did not write to him beyond the one note, and he did not write to me beyond a single line that said, I am holding the door. A. On the 8th day, I sat at the inn's window with that note flat on the sill in front of me. I had written him a letter that morning, 3 pages, the kind of letter a woman writes when she has been alone too long, and has at last someone she can be honest with about it. I had told him that I had not slept properly since the paper appeared. I had told him I understood now why he had waited 3 years to write to me in Antwerp. I had told him that the right decision and the bearable decision are not always the same decision, and that I had made the right one and was bearing it badly. I read the letter through twice. I folded it. I put it in the fire. I watched it burn. Then I picked up his single line and put it in my pocket. because his I would keep. That was the cost. Not large by some measures. By mine, it was the worst 11 days since 1810, because for the first time in 7 years I had had someone to write to, and I had asked him not to, and he had obeyed me. When Mr. Pelham brought the news of the retraction, I closed the brief in front of me. I told him I would be at Ravensmere House by evening. I packed the case myself. I did not arrive announced. Mrs. Whitcomb and Lady Anne were in residence. I had confirmed this from the inn before ordering the carriage, but I asked the footman not to disturb them. I knew what I was doing. A duke's house, the duke alone in his library, a woman walking in past the household. It was not improper by accident. I was electing the impropriety. If the libel had not destroyed me, this would not either, and I was past the point of asking permission of any drawing room in England. The footman who opened the door this time was the same one who had received me on the first afternoon. He knew my name now. He bowed. He said, "Lady Eleanor, His Grace is in the library." He did not announce me. I crossed the hall alone. Adrian was at the writing desk. He stood when I came in. He had been writing. I could see the letter half finished, my name in the salutation. And he set the pen down very carefully, as though afraid of breaking something. "I have come," I said. I had prepared a speech in the carriage. I had abandoned it on the front step. "You have come. The paper has retracted. The libel is over. Hugo is signing a deed of surrender on Thursday. The estate reverts to me. The settlement is drawn. Mr. Pelham anticipates the patent for the title to be reissued before Christmas." "Yes." "You asked me a question in the gallery." "Yes." I walked across the library. I stopped in front of the writing desk. He did not move. I looked up at him, and he looked down at me, and his hand at his side opened very slightly, the way a man's hand opens when he is preparing not to reach for something he wants. "Adrian," I said, "call on me." He closed his eyes once, then he opened them, and they were the dark blue of a thing held back at last from breaking. He raised his hand and took mine. He brought it to his mouth. He kissed it once, the back of the knuckles, then, more slowly, the palm. The palm was a thing he should not have done. The palm undid me. I felt the heat of his mouth pass through my whole arm and settle somewhere under my ribs that had been cold for 7 years. "Lady Eleanor," he said against my hand. "I will." "I think you should kiss me," I said. He looked up. He did not let go of my hand. "Here?" he said. "Now?" "Now." He let go of my hand only long enough to set both of his on either side of my face. He kissed me as a man kisses a woman he has been waiting to kiss for 3 years and has thought he would not be allowed to. The kiss was not hurried. It was not the kiss of a man taking a thing. It was the kiss of a man being given a thing he had not believed would come. My hands found his coat at the chest and gripped it, and his mouth opened against mine, and the library, and the writing desk, and the calculations, and the 7 years, and Mr. Crayle, and the dark drink, and the moonlit gallery, and Cowper, all of it fell away. When he stopped because I could not have, he pressed his forehead to mine and breathed, and I heard him breathe, and I thought this is what it is to be home. "Eleanor," he said against my mouth, "Lady Eleanor Marchmont Ashby. Will you marry me?" Yes. When? As soon as the patent is reissued. That is 6 weeks. 6 weeks? That is too long, he said. I know. He kissed me again, more carefully, and this time he made it last. We were married on a Tuesday in March 1818, at the chapel at Ravensmere. Mrs. Whitcomb gave me away, because she said no one else in England had the right, and she would fight any man who claimed it. She wore lavender silk and a brooch that had belonged to her mother. Mr. Pelham stood up with Adrian and read the prayer book responses in the same dry voice with which he had broken Crayle, and the village rector, who had baptized me in 1793, wept openly when he reached the part about the giving of my name. Madame Verlinden's notary had crossed from Antwerp with her physician and her chaplain, and the 3 of them sat in the front pew on my side, where my mother's people would have sat, had any of them lived. Lady Anne sat beside them and held my mother's pearls in her lap until the moment I was ready to put them on. I wore my mother's pearls and a new dress in the dark gold she had favoured. Adrian wore his sabre-scarred forearm under a coat he had had cut to show the line of it, because he had said that he would not begin his marriage hiding any part of himself from me. He had not yet told me the story of the scar. He had said he would, in time. I was content to wait. When the rector pronounced us, Adrian turned to me before he kissed me and said, very low, only for me to hear, Lady Eleanor Whitcomb of Ravensmere, Countess of Ashby in her own right. He had been practicing the sentence. I heard the practice in it. I will hear it for the rest of my life. In April, he took me into the long gallery and stopped me under the same moonlit window, and he uncovered a thing he had been working on in private for 2 months. It was a new shield. The Ravensmere arms, the eagle and the laurel, had been recut. In the lower right quarter, where a duke may marry a wife of his choosing and impale her arms beside his own, he had had the Ashby quartering carved, with my mother's Marchmont sable and silver in its proper place. The carver had brought the shield up to the gallery that morning. Adrian had told no one but the carver. Crayle ordered the Ashby silver recast, he said behind me. He ordered your mother's quartering ground off every piece. I have had it cut into my own coat of arms in stone, where no one can take a file to it. It will be on the gate at Ravensmere by next Michaelmas. It will be on every door of this house. It will be on every carriage I keep. He told my father to bury your name with your mother's. I am putting them both back where they belong. I did not speak for a moment. That, I said, is not how this is done. I am the Duke of Ravensmere, he said. It is how I do it. I leaned my head against his shoulder. He put his arm around me. We stood looking at the new shield in the moonlight for some time, and I thought of the silver spoons in Hugo's house, with their bare, ground-down faces. And I thought of my mother, whom I had not seen in 9 years. And I thought she would have liked him. She would have liked him very much. A year on. The Ashby estate is in good order. Mr. Pelham, who has informally appointed himself my man of business since the affair concluded, came down at Lady Day with the year's accounts and pronounced himself satisfied, which, from Mr. Pelham, is praise that no one else in England receives. The rental income for 1818 was £9,400, of which I directed £3,000 to the village, a new schoolhouse, the repair of the church roof, a fund for the tenants displaced by Hugo's neglect, and the remainder to a trust I have established for Madame Verlinden's nieces in Antwerp, who were not mentioned in her will, but to whom she had been quietly attached. Hugo, you will want to know, lives quietly in Devonshire on an allowance I settled on him in exchange for his deed of surrender. He has not written to me. I have not written to him. His wife is not received in any house I know of. The Dowager Lady Marchmont's grave, in case the question presents itself, remains as she left it. I decline the suggestion that her name be removed from the family vault. She buried mine. I will not bury hers. The distinction matters to me. Lady Anne is in town for the season and writes weekly. She has appointed herself the social manager of my reintroduction, on the grounds that I have been out of England long enough to require one, and that she will not trust the task to anyone less ruthless than herself. I find I do not mind. Her ruthlessness is the kind I learned to recognize in Antwerp. Mr. Crayle was struck from the rolls in February 1818, prosecuted at the Spring Assizes, and sentenced to 7 years' transportation. He sailed in June. He did not write to me before he sailed, which surprised no one. I had not expected him to, and I had not wanted him to. I understand from Mr. Pelham that he died of fever in New South Wales in his 2nd year, which I record here without comment. Adrian and I are at Ravensmere in the long autumn light of October 1818. The gallery shield is mounted on the gate as he promised. The Ashby silver, recast in 1810 with the quartering filed off, has been melted and recast again, this time at my direction, with the Marchmont sable and silver returned to its place. The new pieces are heavier than the old, because I had the silversmith add to the weight from a bar of Madame Verlinden's bullion she had set aside for me, without saying so. Each spoon now carries a portion of her. I use them every morning at breakfast. This morning, particularly. Adrian came down before me. He has taken to rising early since November, and was at the table when I came in. He has been reading me Cooper at breakfast for some months, which is a small joke between us that I do not propose to explain. He looked up. He saw what I was carrying. He set the book down. "Eleanor, I have something to tell you," I said. I sat. I set my mother's letter, the one that had reached me in Antwerp in 1816, the one that had begun all of this, beside my plate. I had not shown it to him before. I had been waiting for the right morning. I slid it across. "Read it after," I said. "After what?" "After I tell you that in May," I said, "you will have a son or a daughter. I would like the daughter to be called Helena, after my mother. The son may be called whatever you like, but I have ideas." He looked at me. He stood up. He came round the table. He did not pick up the letter. He put his arms around me and held me a long time without speaking. And the gallery shield was outside on the gate, and Madame Verlinden's spoons were on the table, and my mother's letter was beside my plate, and his hand was at the back of my neck, the way it had been on the night of the kiss in the library. And I knew, with the precise clarity I had not been granted in 7 years, and have been granted every day since, that the burying was finished, and the carrying had begun. "Helena," he said into my hair. "Helena." "Yes."